Hey, what's up, Liron here, coming at you with another episode of Painting Masters, episode 84, and today we're going to look at works by Carolyn Lord, very impressive paintings, and I'm going to show you, I actually read a few interviews with her because I was curious about her style, and if you look at it, it's a very mosaic-like style. There are a few interesting characteristics to it that I think maybe we can benefit from. So one of the first things that I noticed, at least, is how there are barely any soft edges. It's all just hard edges. It's a collection of hard shapes. And it goes to show you how, and she mentions in the interview that, like, from afar, she wants the full impression to occur, but then when you walk up close, you can see almost the mosaic pieces. So let me show you. If we zoom in, and this is something, zoom out, sorry, this is something I experienced with the majority of her paintings. They're actually very realistic from afar, very realistic. Close to like photorealistic in the way that not when you look up close, but just from afar. And there's some very clever use of colors. Because in shapes, of course, because the edges don't really play a part here. So right off the bat, you see that with the details that are a little up close, the colors are much stronger, the saturation is much stronger. And she talks about how one of the first things she thinks about when she paints is what attracted her to paint the scene in the first place. And I bet you it's these flowers and the beautiful contrast with the background. It's a little more hazy, maybe a little more gray and muted. So you can really see the layers of color and how they move from saturated all the way back. Now, one more thing that she mentioned that I found fascinating is she is trying to go with a direct approach, meaning getting the right value, the right color the first time. Fewer glazing. Now, she does end up glazing when something needs to be darker, but for the most part, the aspiration at least is to paint things as much as possible in one go, and you can tell. Especially when you look at these areas here, it's just done in one go as much as possible. Now, all of these things, these lessons or approaches and methods, again, doesn't mean that's the right way in any way, shape, or form. And this is vastly different from my own style. What I do hope to do with these kinds of videos is to inspire you, if something inspires you, not by force, but maybe give you the option of spontaneously being inspired by something and then maybe wanting to try it out. She said a lot of her early influences were were artists that were doing things very much like printmaking or hard edges, so softening isn't really something she does too much. Now, this is a great example, and we're going to see a few scenes like this of the great understanding and control of temperature and placement of colors. Just the first thing that I noticed was, and this will happen very often, light is very complex. Light is going to come at you from all angles, and when you're out there, and by the way, most of these were done plein air, which adds another level of impressiveness to them. Some corrections maybe back in the studio, but mostly plein air. So one thing that really catches my eye, and this will happen a lot with varied light and shadow conditions, is when you look at this entire cliff, which was painted, probably one glaze, maybe two, notice how this part here is significantly warmer. If you're having a hard time seeing, again, we can zoom out, warm, and then moves into some cools, purples, right? This is very common. It happens when light reflects and bounces off different areas. And because there is considerably strong sunlight here, it probably bounces off these cliffs and feeds directly into this. It's almost like a diffused light, but it actually projects light on it. You will notice if you take a big piece of watercolor paper and you place it in front of the sun, the floor under it is going to be much brighter. It's just how it happens. Light is very dynamic. It bounces all over the scene. So you have that, the purples and the gentle kind of magentas, or just more purple, I would say. And then here on the bottom right, there's a bit of more of that turquoise, beautiful. And that leads the eye, that creates a pleasing harmony. And if you look at the ripples and the waves, again, we're so worried sometimes about, getting a smooth edge or getting the details to, getting the ripples to look like they're round. You can achieve the same effect with hard edge. And if that's something you've never even thought of, that's a great thing to have in mind, maybe for the future. Put it in the back pocket. You don't have to force yourself to do anything. In fact, I'd much rather you don't. But I want to show you how things are possible in a different way than maybe you're used to. I'm definitely learning a lot from this. Now let's look at another one, and then we'll get to my next point as it pertains, and this is one of the only ones where some edges are blended. So you see around here with the lemon in the bottom, the lemon here on the left. She said she's making an effort to at least smoothen some edges in their interview. But in any case, I wanted to touch on something. She mentioned how she's painting I think she works from light to dark mostly, probably not dogmatic, but she mentioned how she'll paint the light first very often, and she'll paint the shape of light a little larger than it is in theory. The reason why, she's not that interested in painting one shape next to one another and then dealing with the white gap that can be created. And I'm sure you've experienced this before, where you're trying to paint things directly and then there's a white gap. We talked about this in the context of figures and having a white gap behind them that can sometimes throw off the impression and break the feel of realism and togetherness. So what she does is paint the light a little larger so that she has some wiggle room when she'll add the dark shape around it. And by doing so, that's the negative painting aspect of it. You negatively paint the border of the light by adding the dark around it. She has some wiggle room to put it. She can put it where she planned to, or a little outside, a little inside. I think that's a great insight for me personally, because I'll be using that. Because the few times I did try painting light to dark, I do end up with these borders, and she says she even uses them in a way to her advantage by treating those as the gradual transition. It's a shape that's created by overlapping two shapes, which I find fascinating. This one as well, like really, if you take a few steps back, this is so realistic from afar. It's pretty amazing. It almost looks like a filter, but you can tell it's much more organic, and an artist did it. This like a software can't do this now. I mean, with the advancement of AIs, maybe it will be possible in the future, but not for now. Not even close, I think, to the level of organic feel to it. Now, look at this leaf, like this shape here, the dark greenish, kind of bluish green. That's so neat how it starts light because there's reflected light from the lemons onto it. That's another smooth transition. So just brilliant work. So I want to show you two scenes, one after the other. It's the exact same location, and it's really fun to play kind of, let's catch the differences. So it's the same scene. Both, I think one of them was demonstrated in class, maybe the other one too. But what's so interesting to me is if we go through them, I'm going to bounce through them a few times here. One of the things I noticed first is how, of course, the shapes are similar, right? The cliffs in the background were interpreted a little differently, right? Squares and then round, squares, round. But that's a small kind of interpretation. By the way, maybe it showcases the mood, right? Because you see it here as well. This is a little more linear, and then this is a little more organic. Same goes here, a little more organic, a little more hard lines. That's one of the things you recognize. But another thing is, and that's due to the light and shadow conditions, look at how the shadows here are much more blue. They're still quite purple, but if you compare this, right? So that's a very pale, violet-y kind of feel to it. And then here, this is a little more blue. And my personal, artistic taste loves this a little more. But again, this is fully, it's fully personal. But yeah, I love this. I love when there's a bit of the blue there in the shadows, not necessarily just the purple. Now look at the ripples. No smooth edges almost at all, and it works super well, right? So there are a few ways of doing things. There are probably endless ways of doing things. And I think the magic trick is to give yourself enough freedom to experiment and find that thing out of sheer curiosity and wanting to do it, rather than, again, relying on external maybe influences or shoulds and tips and advice. Again, I'm trying to show you a vast array of things so that you can make your own decisions, right? So let's look at another one here. So this was interesting, one of the only ones portraying people that I found. I'm sure there's more. Probably, but that's one of the only ones I found. And it's really cool. It's really cool. And again, zoom out a bit. Look at how the background here is so fiery. It's like they're sitting maybe in a garden, and it's so nice to see all this really takes a gentle touch to do these very soft variations on the value scale. To me, I find it very challenging not to go directly to a light mid value, but rather stay in the light to super light value, if you know what I mean. It's really, you can tell it's a little different, right? It's a little more nuanced, which I find really beautiful. Same here with the clothes, the dresses. I love that there's this organic feel to the background, and the shadow is super nice. Even though the wash isn't even, like, who cares? It still reads as one shape. You know, this is why I say, don't. And again, take this with a grain of salt. But one of the things that really irks me about people is something is perceived as a mistake. And then it's not the mistake that caused the problem, it's how you react to the perceived mistake. And you can't stop that reaction. If something bugs you and you're like, oh, this wash is terrible, it will be. But the point is, I think, understanding why do you think it's terrible. For real. Is it actually a terrible wash? Or maybe you're so used to hearing people, including myself, by the way. Hopefully I didn't do this too much in the past, but right now I'm trying not to do it at all. Hearing people saying that's a better way of doing it. So, not necessarily, right? And there's a certain leeway when it comes to, there's huge leeway when it comes to art in general, and then there's certain leeway when it comes to mistakes on a technical level. The thing that carries a painting far better is the vision behind it. The artist's decision, what to focus on, is much more important than small areas where maybe, to me at least, where maybe things are wrong or technically not as effective as they could be. A painting can be very technically off, but still wonderful. Here's a beautiful, beautiful example of those fiery colors, barely any smooth edges. Look at how far things can be taken with just hard edges. And this does take an understanding of light and shadow, colors, harmony, temperature, composition. It does take an understanding. Like, even if you look at this flower, right? So one of the fun things you can do is have your subject literally touch the edges of paper in all four corners. If you can do that, there is something that's very attractive to the eye. And very often, and I do this as well, you place the object just maybe 1 and 2 corners. But look at what she's doing here. She's letting that flower cut the left side and letting this blade of the stem or whatever cut through this side and this corner. It's just very fun to do sometimes. So another thing to consider. Now, this one's super cool. So 2 things, right? The ripples are just magic. That is so nice. I've never seen ripples painted this way, and it's so clever. It's almost like recognizing the pattern, painting the pattern. And then these rocks here, look at how much variation. And this is the perfect example of what I like. It shows why I dislike the other thing. So many people, when they paint, and again, this is my personal choice, do with it as you wish. So many people, when they paint, they just use the same color to darken, to shade. So it's a brown, and then it's a light brown, then it's a dark brown, then it's a very light brown, then it's a really, really dark brown, which is fine. I personally much more appreciate and enjoy this. Look at that. Pale green, pale blue, pale oranges, all sorts of different variations of everything. This is so neat. I love this. Personally, I love this. Even in the water you see it, but let's not go, the water is challenging because this is still one big wash. Maybe this is one big wash, and you can see some variation in it. A bit of purple, a bit of green, a bit of yellow-green. But this, just individual shapes, so clever. So tasty. And this one, oh man, this is good. So from afar, this is really, and I can't minimize it, sorry, that's as zoomed out as it gets, but this one, I don't know why, by the way, it should zoom out a little more. But yeah, this is just so, take a few steps back and appreciate the realism there. These strong greens down at the bottom. And she mentions she's painting in a very dry climate. I believe she's based in California, so the washes dry fast, which is responsible to a lot of this. Again, a lot of these are done plein air. If I had to guess, this was done plein air as well, based on its visuals. That's what I would guess. I would probably be right just based on statistics, because most of them, as she says, were done plein air. But to me, the visuals also, I can tell. Maybe I'm wrong, but to me it feels that way because of the strong colors, something that's a little easier to see when you're out there, so to speak. but yeah, just genius interpretation of shapes. And look at how, if you forget about edges for a while, suddenly shape design becomes important. And the way you design your shapes has more impact on the end result. And we're going to finish with the last one. This was the most different out of the bunch that I could find, because it's, of course, not a landscape or flowers, but rather a home, building, house structure. There were a few others. There was a gas station and a bunch of others, but this is sweet. And maybe I'm attracted to it directly because it's so different from the others. So I like to find pieces of art that are a little standout within an artist's catalog. I think that's very fun. And this is one of them. And look at how much impact that blue has thanks to the other colors around it. It's not competing. You have maybe, you know, this blue, cyan, turquoise, and then this green is quite strong. This shadow is quite strong. And the rest of the greens are a variety, you know. They're not too crazy strong. And I think that's a big part of why this, zoom in a bit more, why this one's just fantastic in my opinion. So yeah, there you have it. Works by Carolyn Lord. Just brilliant. Now, I do want you to do me a favor, if you can, for a second. Leave a comment down below, and I wrote it down for myself. Did seeing these inspire you in a way, or give you an idea to try something out? And if so, what is it? Let me know in a comment down below. I'm gonna do this a lot in the coming videos because it's helpful to better internalize it. Once you write it down, your mind will think about it, will ponder it, will consider it. So let me know if there is anything that this inspired you to try and what it is in a comment down below. I do appreciate if you can. If you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Some people aren't and still watching the videos, and I'm super grateful for that. Leave a like. Let me know your thoughts as always. I will talk to you in the next video. Until then, take care.